Salutations to the fans of Fire Emblem, I'm Don151, bringing to you Part 1 Chapter 6 of my Fire Emblem 10 Hard Mode 0% Gross playthrough, and for this chapter, I'm going to be joined by the first dried fruit of its kind, and the biggest fan of the Dawn Brigade, Raisins.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show, Don. Yeah, no, huge fan of the Dawn Brigade. I love all the units, love all the maps. I love this two-parter here, 1-6, we got 161 and 162. Apparently the only two-part map in the entire game, there's no others. So we get this nice little route map into kill boss segment that we get to do here. We also get 3 brand new units. We saw them last chapter in 1-5, right? But we get 3 new ones here. We get Tarneo, Jill, and Zehark. So what are your plans with these units? What are you doing with them here?
The first thing that we're going to do in this chapter is to promote Jill with the Master Seal that Sothe stole from the soldier in 1-5. It's a pretty no-brainer promotion in 0% growths. Jill is notable for being one of the strongest Dawn Brigade units, and probably one of the strongest units in the game, depending on whom you ask. But in 0% growth, because she's not going to gain any stats from level up, we pretty much cap her potential right here. She's notorious for starting off as not being very strong. In fact, I think Wimpage pointed out in the prior chapter that she has a tendency to rush in at enemies and get herself killed, because she's neither very bulky nor very hard hitting. So the extra stats definitely shored that up slightly, but more importantly, we promoted her because we need her 1 extra point of movement for the strategy that we're going to use.
Yeah, so the 1 extra point of movement is really critical on 161 in particular. 161 is a route map, which means we need to kill all the enemies in order to win. There is one particular enemy, a priest in the far northwest part of the map, who does not have a weapon equipped. This is important because, everyone else who has a weapon equipped will just attack us on enemy phase, and if we kill them on the counter, then all we have to do is get vaguely near them and they'll die this turn. The priest, however, won't issue the attack against us, so we can't counterattack him, so we need to get a unit up there, attack that priest specifically, in order to get this 3-turn clear of the map.
Those of you watching who are plugged in to Radiant Dawn low turn count runs might be aware of a 2-turn strategy for this map. It's a very cool strategy that involves shoving Sothe a total of about 10 times so that he can make his way all the way to the northwest part of the map without needing any sort of rescuing. The problem with that strategy, which is the reason why I don't do it here, is because in 0% growths it requires him to get critical hits on 2 of the Armor Knights up there, and it also requires Ilyana to 1-round an enemy that she neither doubles nor 2-shots. So this is one instance in which transfer bonuses would have come in really handy, because they will let her do that, and also really help with still survival. So in a 3-turn clear, we can instead send Tarneo to the top left corner of the map. He has excellent offensive and defensive stats, and pretty much everything will just die in 1 round to him. His problem, being in general, is mobility, but fortunately, we have a couple of characters who are far more mobile than he is, and who have the ability to rescue him.
Yeah, no, this rescue chain you did here with Volug, the moment I saw you do it in the recording you sent me, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm like counting the squares to Jill. Yeah. It's like, I can instantly see that Volug's just going to do the give command onto Jill, and then Jill's going to do the drop command onto Tarneo. I'm sure you found some magic square where you can just drop him, and Tarneo just absolutely demolishes and evaporates everything. Kind of speaking of evaporating everything and demolishing everything, we have Sothe doing like 100 gazillion combats here and not really killing everything. Is this maybe why you gave him the Resolve Scroll and Preps earlier?
Yeah, so let's take a moment to talk about the skill Resolve, because it's a very important skill for this run. Resolve is a skill that I think only exists in Tellius. I know it kind of exists in Engage, but it's a totally different form, and so you can't really even call it the spiritual successor. But it's a skill that when assigned to a unit, when their HP drops below 50%, they gain a 50% bonus to their skill and speed. And so it has both offensive and defensive uses. Here we're using it mostly defensively, because it will boost the unit's Avoid, thanks to the speed bonus. But there are a lot of instances later in the run where we would use the speed offensively in order for them to clear a doubling threshold that they normally wouldn't. We also assigned Cancel to Sothe. It's something that kind of assists with reliability by allowing him to potentially not take a counterattack when he hits an enemy, because he does have to sustain a lot of combat over the course of this strategy.
So one other unit whom we're using a lot in this chapter, but we haven't really touched on them yet, is Zehark. Zehark we're just setting up to this top right corner to kill a bunch of Armor Knights, an Archer, and eventually a Pegasus. Now, Zehark's offenses and defenses are pretty dicey. Like, everything is very chance-based. In order to kill any remotely challenging enemy, he needs to either get a crit or get an Adept proc chance, and both of those are pretty unreliable. He'll usually do 1, but he might not do 1, so it's pretty dicey. And then his defenses are also pretty unreliable because it's very dodging-based. He needs to dodge the incoming attacks. His bulk is worse than Sothe's even. So he happens to be adequate for this purpose in the top right. He just needs to kill 2 of the 3 Armor Knights so that he can attack Command the Archer. and that's all he needs to do. We got lucky on this run, and he succeeded. Another thing is we sent him up there just because it's the best way to train him for the moment. We don't really have the Paragon Scroll, which would double his EXP and make it like a lot more profitable to train Zihark super heavily, but for the moment we're just going to send him where he's best now and not really worry too much about whether or not he's earning maximum EXP.
So someone who doesn't have any trouble with offense or defense in this map is Toronio. In fact, he just nuked the entire top left corner, cleanly two-shotting both Armor Knights with a hand axe. The only thing he did in one round was that Myrmidon, which we brought a Steel Axe just in case he missed and he could one-shot them. And then it's just a matter of cleanup. So we had Sothe backtrack slightly to find a hidden arm scroll with his elevated item fighting rates. This arm scroll we're going to end up selling. They're pretty valuable items because they're treated like stat boosters. They sell for 4,000 gold. We will need to use arm scrolls later on to raise some units' weapon ranks, but right now, the Dawn Brigade is so short on cash with the amount of money that we spent in 1-4 and 1-5 on magical items that we really need a small cash infusion to help sustain the Dawn Brigade's funds. So that's chapter 1-6, stage 1, finished in 3 turns, and let's move on to stage 2.
162 is slightly different from 161. It is a kill boss map, which means all we need to do is defeat the Cavalier boss Laverton in the northwest corner. We don't need to kill all the other enemies, we'll kill a lot of them, but we only need to kill Laverton. So there's also this kind of side objective on the map where Fiona, who's this Cavalier, we met her slightly earlier in the story, she's a native Dayan. She ends up in this chapter, recognizing the atrocities of the Benyan occupation, and so she just completely becomes insubordinate to the Benyan occupation. In any case, she and all of her Cav friends pick up a bunch of civilians and are running off to the right, and because they're all weighed down by these civilians they picked up, they just get murdered by these red units. So the casual experience of this map is that you kind of want to go over here and try and help out Fiona and rescue her while everyone else is just kind of defending the bridge. Is this the kind of approach you have to take in LTC?
Definitely not Raisins, because the best way to deal with that side objective is just to kill the boss as early as you can. So our real side objective is grinding for as much weapon experience on Volug as possible, and also getting a little bit more extra experience onto Zihark. Now, it seems a little counterintuitive that we mentioned in stage 1 that Zihark is our new training project, and yet we're not really giving him that much experience. He's only getting like 6 experience per kill, so it's not like we're going to go to extreme lengths to min-max this sort of thing. We don't get the Paragon Scroll until we defeat Laverton after this chapter, which is why Zihark's training is kind of secondary, and we're mostly focused on Volug.
Yeah, no, Volug gets the full strike rank here. So we drop Taranero off here to the west. This is in range of the boss with the Javelin, and sneakily you equipped the Nihil Scroll, I believe, as well. The Nihil Scroll is used to cancel out the boss's cancel skill. So ordinarily Laverton could come up, and there's a decent chance that he procs cancel and just prevents Taranera's counterattack and adds 1 turn to the counter. Obviously this is pretty disastrous, so you just equip the Nihil skill, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of speedrunners are familiar with this occurrence happening because they choose to not take the time to equip Nihil onto Toronio and instead just roll the dice, and sometimes Laverton activates cancel and you take a time loss. But here we just chew through everything with the Javelin. Again, Toronio showing the extreme dominance of his stats. It's unfortunate that he's no longer playable in part 1 after this chapter, so we just let him take his time to shine as much as possible. There is some nuance to the choice of the Javelin on this enemy phase. He one-rounds everything that he has to with either a Javelin or a hand axe, but in most cases a Javelin is just strictly worse. It has lower might and lower hit. We choose to use the worst of the 2 weapons here in order to save hand axe uses for later situations. Now, you might notice that it looks as if Toronio is attacking from a height disadvantage, which implies that he's getting a massive hit penalty, but this is just a visual thing. The game considers the enemy to be on equal height, and so Toronio isn't attacking with a height penalty at all. As things wrap up, I think we can say that we got everything we wanted to out of this chapter. Volug gained 32 weapon experience to hit S-Ring Strike in record time. We got a red gem from an enemy Cavalier for the much needed money, and even all of the green units lived. The only thing we didn't get is a Master Seal on the left hand side of the map, but we skipped that one because we don't really need it anymore. That's chapter 1-6 stage 2 done in 2 turns, and we'll see you next time.
See you all later.